I am once again asking you to watch a response video.
Yeah, I know. Dead meme already. I wanted to shoot this last week. Got busy. Had to work an extra shift, so... What do you get? You get dated memes. What do you expect from a ancient, decrepit boomer? Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. Pat here. Gonna join in on a topic. It's been floating around. It's a pretty fun one. The Metal Tag 2021 via the Rock Scout. I will leave a link to his channel as well as all the questions, all the topics. Some good ones on here. I haven't joined in on one of these response videos in a while. I thought it would be, they're usually pretty breezy. I pulled these records 12 inches like a week and a half ago, so I've been kind of gestating in my brain stuff to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into number one. Music spoiled by vocals. This band, Vivisic, Nuked Identity. This was a freebie from Tank Crimes, put this out sometime in the 2010s. It's kind of kitchen sink Japanese hardcore with lots of kind of wacky influences outside of the usual kind of punk and metal grind kind of stuff that they're doing. Interesting musical approach, but the vocals are just way too squawky, and I just can't hang. I had trouble actually thinking of something that was actually ruined by the vocals. Like, there's vocals that, to me, that have been sort of an acquired taste. Certainly, like, deliberately obnoxious kind of punk vocals, like the Crucifix, the guy from King Horse who goes between, like, a metal croon, almost Danzig kind of thing. Danzig produced their record, so that makes sense, into, like, a screech, like a rocker, like, kind of screech that took a while for me to get into it, but now that I am into it, I love it. Love that band. Some examples that I almost pulled is, like, I kind of didn't like this at one point. This definitely, I just can't do it. Yeah, just way too much of a weird kind of squawk. Who knows, might grow on me at some point. Which at this point I should just get tattooed on my forehead, because I say that a lot. Because you never know, man. There's so much stuff that I used to hate and I just love now. Something ruined by production. Let you down by bad production. Again, a tough one, because I like raw, abrasive, noisy production. It's hard for me to find anything, like, objectively bad, but man, Unseen Terror's Human Error. Music's awesome, you know, cool, like, grindy hardcore from the late 80s, early Earache release, Shane Embury's project before he joined Napalm Death. Definitely along the lines of, you know, all those great UKHC bands like Heresy, Concrete Socks, all that stuff. But man, it's just, the recording, it's weird. It's so weird. I mean, like, you take Heresy's Face Up to It. That's not a great sounding record, but it has its charm. I think that has like an electric snare on it, which is weird. It's kind of thin and tinny. This is thin and tinny and has sort of a weird drum sound as well. Not sure if it has the electric snare or not. I don't remember. But, like, it's all bass. It's all distorted bass. Like, you can barely hear the guitar. The vocals are kind of that melodic sort of Heresy style. And I don't know, it just seems like the dude's kind of like yell talking, you know? There's songs about Garfield. That's not really related to the production, but it is kind of weird. They have appeal sessions that sounds awesome. It's totally ripping, but I could never get around the production on Unseen Terror, Human Error. I mean, it was a tough time for extreme music in terms of production. People are still figuring out how to record stuff with blast beats and you know, detuned guitars and all that, but they definitely missed the mark on this, in my summation. Sorry, boys. Another tough one for me here. A band that suffers from a weak member, which I think a few people already giggled over, like, weak member. I listen to so much, like, amateurish punk and hardcore where I'm not I don't think the musicianship of a particular member has ever like ruined anything for me. But one thing where with one member being weak sauce maybe in other ways is, and I don't even have the record that he plays on where I think it's affected by his contributions, is Robert Trujillo, who joined on this stuff. This is Suicidal Tendencies, Controlled by Hatred, Feel Like Shit, Deja Vu. It's Lights Camera Revolution that's ruined for me, only partially too. I mean, there's some fucking rippers on that album, namely Disco's Out, Murder's In, You Can't Bring Me Down, of course. But then you have songs that haven't held up for me over the years. And I used to love the metal, the thrash funk, post-thrash funky shit that was big at the time. I loved Scatterbrain. I loved early Red Hot Chili Peppers when I was like 11 years old, you know, Mordred, all that kind of stuff. And I loved that Suicidal Tendencies record. That was my gateway with getting into them. But like Send Me Your Money and that stuff and just the slap bass. And as a bonus thing, a friend of mine who I will not mention because I don't want to tell tales out of school or whatever, but I knew a guy that sang in a pretty well-regarded hardcore band from upstate New York, and they opened a big fest with Suicidal sometime in the late 90s, I believe, and Trujillo came backstage and they were all just like waiting to play, I think, this band, and they were like really stoked to meet him. And he just like angrily accused them of eating his deli tray and was a complete dick apparently, which is funny because everybody in the band were vegan and vegetarian. So yeah, I mean, doesn't ruin Suicidal for me, that stuff, but those funky tracks, man, I can't do it. Can't hang. Definitely not fucking with Infectious Grooves at this age. Number 4, show an album that to you defines heavy. For me, that would be Warhorse, As Heaven Turns to Ash. Local guys, Doomsters, from Worcester. I think members are in Conclave now, who are also excellent. Desolate was the previous band that were a great like death black metal band, early 90s. I mean, this is just a good mix of all that is heavy and doom. I think Pentagram fans would get something out of this, as well as people into the like almost kind of droney end of the spectrum, you know, early Southern Lord recordings. Super fucking heavy, thick, close to kind of like Electric Wizard or something like that in sound, but I think they're way better, just better songcraft myself. Awesome shit. This was a Southern Lord release, reissue anyway. I don't think it originally came out on Southern Lord, but I could be wrong. Nice gatefold, heavy as balls. I discovered it when I just was I was posting on, I think, doommetal.com 15 years ago or something, and was like, I want something that comes close to Forest of Equilibrium, and whoever responded said, you're not going to get anything that sounds like Forest, but if you like that, check out these guys, Warhorse and Reverend Bizarre. So close enough. Then we've got show an album recommended to you by the music community. Oh crap, that's out of sync here. Let me find it. Oh, here it is. I saw this and somebody interpreted it as the VC, that music community in particular, so I went by that rule. I think that was Matt or Ben said that. And I didn't want to list off the usual list of suspects because Brain Smasher, Eric Bauer, Marty, Jason Hook, all those people have done plenty for my wallet, namely inflicting it with giving me new stuff to check out. I want to mention somebody that wasn't the usual group of dudes that I'm always talking about, and Trez from Total Metal Rejection mentioned Patrons the Dark by Paralysis, and this was a record, I knew the cover. I remember seeing ads for it in SOD in the early 90s. It originally came out on Concrete. Grindcore, not Concrete. I think Grindcore turned into Concrete. I'll have to look into that. I don't remember it right now. Pretty sure that's the thing. But this is early brutal death from the New Orleans area, and it has one or two members that went on to Soylent Green, then Goat and it's got that like climbing, pounding, almost kind of slamming early brutal death metal je ne sais quoi to it, you know, that sort of technical but really fucking punishing kind of approach that a lot of the early brutal death metal had. But it's got a really dark feel to it as well, and there's a lot of like sort of like Lovecraftian horror influences going into it as far as the lyrical content goes. And like, I mean, I think it's Albrecht Dürer or Gustav Doré. I always get those two confused, but I love the classic art on that, and classic '90s. What is that, papyrus font or whatever? Good stuff. Great record. Right. Show an album that takes your musical taste in a different direction. So sometime in the early to mid 2000s, I was discovering, just branching out, I always come back to heavy stuff and fast stuff, aggressive, abrasive music, but I don't always want to listen to that. And a guy in my hometown named Grant, it was a thing for a while where all my friends, like the quickest way to transport music to each other were to burn data CDs. And he burned me a data CD of stuff that continues to blow my mind this day. First time I ever heard Midnight. The first time I ever heard Luke Tadolo. A whole bunch of stuff, ranging from metal to, I think Dean Dirg was on there, which was like really energetic, like German garagey hardcore. They were great, like all over the map because the dude had great taste. And he was the guy who, I believe, on the same data disc introduced me to Mahavishnu Orchestra, Birds of Fire. I'm no Aaron Margosian. I'm not a big jazz head. I'll throw it on occasionally in the background at work sometimes, something basic, Miles Davis, Bitches Brew or whatever. But I have a strong connection to this record, and I love it. It's such a journey. Just this, fusion, I guess, is the type of jazz this is. But that sort of psychedelic, fantastical approach. Wonderful, wonderful band. Then we've got a gem from my collection. This wasn't cheap when I bought it, and its value has increased quite a bit since then, which wasn't that long ago, less than a decade. But this is an original pressing of Demigod's Slumber of the Sullen Eyes. Finnish death metal classic. Early 90s. Drowned Productions. Not too much else to say, other than it's a perfect Finnish death metal masterpiece. You know it, you love it. I don't have tons of super pricey OG pressings. I'm a pragmatic, common sense kind of person where I'll take it on CD, I'll take a repress, as long as the repress doesn't look like shit. But I saw this on the shelf at Armageddon Records, Record Store Day. What Record Store Day was it? Record Store Day 2013, maybe? And I was just like, I gotta have that in my hands. My greedy little mitts. All right, number 8. The band in your collection that formed closest to where you live. I know that there are bands from Salem. There's like some punk bands and stuff. I read somewhere that December Wolves were from here, but I could have sworn I read somewhere else that it was Salem, New Hampshire. Yeah, Salem has bands. I don't have anything on LP by any bands from Salem anyway. So I went with nearby Lynn, Massachusetts, I believe, is the home of Disrupt. Now I'm like, fuck, I gotta fact check that. But they're from the North Shore. Disrupt discography, box set. Everything they've ever done on a Gatefold 4 LP. Just super important American crustcore. Raging shit. Kind of the introduction for an entire generation into crust punk. They were on Relapse, so I heard them on the Corporate Death Comp. They were some of the best songwriters for that genre in general. No shade thrown towards Doom or Extreme Noise Terror, who are big influences on Disrupt, but Disrupt had a certain way of writing really catchy, like tempo changes and breakdowns and stuff that kind of gave their song approach, made it feel a little less monochromatic. You know what I mean? Super good shit. Gotta love Disrupt if you're into any kind of crust stuff. Metal album you reach for melody-wise. Hands down, Crystal Logic by Manila Road. Over everything, really. I mean, there's some stiff competitors there. Stiff competitors. When it comes to melodic metal, anything with melody in it, I mean, it's a pretty broad brush you're painting with there with that topic. I love Priest. I love Maiden. I've been really into Savage Grace lately, thanks to Barbecutioner. I've kind of been revisiting that record, that Master Disguise album. There's a lot of stuff to pick from, and this was off the top of my head the first thing I thought of, just because I've had Necropolis. It's still stuck in my head, still from the first time I heard this. That's how good that fucking song is, and I realized that Manila Road has a huge body of work. Much of it is really really well done, and a lot of people that are super big Manila Road heads are kind of sick of this one, or are like, okay, check out the other records, and I get that. But for me, this was the first one I got into, and this record is just so good. So good. And the nasally delivery of the vocals, chef's kiss. Totally makes it for me. I think that's another example of an acquired taste, That and Terry Jones from Pagan Altar have that weird nostril doom kind of thing going on. All right. This is album in your collection you would sell first. I just grabbed this because it's a sealed record that got sent to me as a freebie, and I have no idea what it is. Rad Cloud. I think it's indie-ish kind of stuff. I have no idea. I haven't even cracked it open. So yeah, I would probably, if I never get around to listening to this, which I'll probably check it out at some point, I'm sure. But there's a good chance I would probably flip this to like residency for $5 or $2 or whatever. Number 11. Which subgenre of metal would you delete from existence? So already, the super obvious ones have been mentioned already. NSBM being the first. Like, the fact that there's like 2, 3 tolerable bands that the songs are actually good does not excuse the ideology, in my opinion. Yeah, who needs fucking Nazis, especially right now when it's like a legitimate fucking problem. And also most of the music is fucking garbage. And also, I think Barbecutioner brought up, like, whatever Five Finger Death Punch is, which is, there's a little bit of bleed over there as far as the demographic. But anyway, I mean, those two being mentioned, I'd have to say, like, it's funny because it's such a sliver, really, is in between a couple of things that I like a lot, but that early 2000s metalcore, that had the real like pretty emo singing and then super generic at the gates riffs. I'm trying to think of the names of the bands now. From Autumn to Ashes is one of them. There are a ton. Atreyu, like all that stuff. All that stuff can take a long walk off a fucking short pier. Number 12, the band or artist you would most like to see an album or reissue from in 2021. Easy. Sacrifix from Australia. Kind of melodic, mid-paced. I'd say sort of inspired by Greek black metal, Black Death kind of stuff. Kind of got sort of a Samael bent too, I'd say. Great use of melody, really catchy riffs. Would love to see something from these two fellas again soon. We'll see. Guys from Stargazer and a bunch of other bands of note. Which 80s metal act would you like to see a comeback album from? Iron Maiden. And hear me out on this. I am definitely in the camp of people that have not really been into anything Iron Maiden has done since Brave New World. It's just too much. The songs are too long. They're just bloated. I can't with most of the stuff they've put out, like, during this century. However, if they were to have put out, like, a lot of people shit on No Prayer for the Dying. If they did that again, they did that album, it was after some, like, synthy kind of proggy records that they did, Seven Son and Somewhere in Time. Like, if they went back to basics, even if it wasn't as good as this early stuff, the Diano stuff, the up to Power Slave era stuff, even if it was just that style of like, hey, let's do fun short songs with, like, dare I say, some pop sensibilities, some catchy choruses and that kind of thing, I wouldn't be mad at all. I'd be interested in hearing that, because I have no interest in them doing 20-minute opuses at all. Show an alternative variation of an album cover. Which, this wasn't easy for me because I don't usually collect multiple copies of one thing. But we have the Accused, Return of Martha Splatterhead, This is the Subcore Records cover. This is a reissue on Unrest. The Accused, Martha there. And then when this got reissued on Combat in the 80s when they got signed, they had this more comic booky looking cover. Zombie boobs. Right there. Love that style. Reminds me of just like West Coast like skateboard style like layout graphic design. It's the red paint slashes and stuff. Very cool. And then there's another cover, I believe, that was on the Earache pressing of this. There was an Earache pressing that was one of the first things that Earache ever did. It might have been even one. It was one or two, I believe. But yeah, The Accused. One of my favorite bands. Definitely my favorite crossover band. Has been for ages. And we got so number 15, a band that for you defines metal. Easy. Venom. Welcome to Hell. Neat Records pressing. Probably a first press, early press, whatever. I mean, everything on this, they nailed it in 1981. You know, we got this gold pentagram, kind of hard to read logo, Baphomet sigil there. Just like that cool reflecting pool thing that a bunch of bands have ripped off. All the titles, you know, Poison, Live Like an Angel, Die Like a Devil, 1000 Days in Sodom, a song called that in 1981. Fucking rad. Defines metal for me. I mean, just the aesthetic, the stage get-ups, the pyrotechnics where they were pretending they were like a band much, much bigger than they were, spending money they didn't have to have this crazy stage show. Over-the-top songs about Satan. Metal as fuck. 100%. Your most metallic album cover. This was tough, and I actually kind of wanted to pull the new Drop Dead because it's like literally metallic. Yeah, it's like, you know, that really cool glossy metallic. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna pull it and show you guys just because that would be funny to see. And Drop Dead, man. Actually, all of their reissues are metallic like that. I don't know if you can see just how chromy looking that is, but this record's fantastic, by the way. I'll probably talk about this a little bit more soon. But yeah, actually looking metal, like a sheet of metal, it's probably that one. But if I want to go for metal aesthetics, I'm going to go with Razor, Violent Restitution. I mean, the chainsaw, the blood, there's a lot of metal records you could pick the cover for. I didn't want to pick something super obvious with like satanic imagery or zombies or over the top gore. This is, yeah, it's pretty close to over the top, the blood and everything, but it's, you know, it's metal shaded as well, you know, and it's got a fucking awesome chainsaw and blood and a razor for some reason suspended from that. I don't know why. Yeah, the first thing that popped in my head, Fringe Recordings, Razor, 1988. Probably their best record, too, in my opinion. Some of the best Canadian thrash recorded, for sure. An album you disliked at first and now highly regard. Another easy one. Morbid Tales by Celtic Frost. Yeah, I just didn't get it like the first couple times I heard it. I think I talked about this at length before, but why not be redundant? Yeah, I was really into Roadrunner, death metal. I was really into Obituary and Sepultura. Stuff produced by Scott Burns, you know, into some heavier, technical, punishing kind of shit like Suffocation. I was also into punk, too, which is weird because I believe around the same time I was into The Exploited and GBH, so kind of weird that Celtic Frost didn't click with me, being more simplistic, rougher recording, you know, that kind of thing. But the vocals weren't brutal enough to sound like a death metal band to me. I liked thrash at the time too, but it didn't fall in that pocket. It's just such a weird approach that they had that was so singular. And obviously, years down the line, I came to completely understand Tom J. Warrior's genius for everything, aesthetics, songwriting, the whole package. But at the first listen, I did not like Morbid Tales. I've shown it off before. I'm not going to run off camera and grab another thing. I just did. But I have the weird cassette pressing that's like not this artwork. It's like a weird statue and the logo's in pink for some reason. Very strange. I think it's a Noise Records pressing of that on cassette. And I got my hands on that in high school and was just like, I don't like this. And then what's odd is a few years down the line when I was like heavily into an industrial and goth and like some old punk, but not really listening to much metal, I got into the Pandemonium and I completely loved that record and I still do, which is that's a divisive one for sure, you know. Into the Pandemonium. Um an album you liked at first but now disregard. That's a tough one for me cuz you know, nostalgia is a pretty potent drug with me. There's not a lot of stuff that I used to love that I don't anymore because it just takes me to that time and place mentally, of course. But I do have a thing of like wearing out albums. Like there's albums that I'll have, like I think it's important that I own them for some reason. But I never, ever, ever listen to or ever feel the desire to reach for. And I can list them, and they're all classics that I listen to into the ground. Ride the Lightning, amazing album, like perfect metal record, thrash metal record, whatever. I've listened to it so many times, I never really feel the desire to put it on. Rain in Blood, another one. I've listened to Show No Mercy more, but for some reason, Rain in Blood, I just listened to it so many times. I just can't. There's some hardcore records, like the Minor Threat, almost their whole discography. I mean, I just never feel the desire to listen to them because I listen to them into the ground. Sick of It All's Blood, Sweat, and No Tears. You know, at this point, I'd rather reach for their second or third records. Just look around or scratch the surface because I listened to it into the ground, even though it's been a very long time since I've been in high school. You know, there are people that were born the year that I graduated high school that are graduate students now. You know, like but still, and the top of those, especially because the cheesiness of some of it and just the aesthetics that went on to influence aspects of the genre that I don't really care for. The record number one of all those where I don't need to listen to it anymore is Among the Living by Anthrax. Um, Loved this. I think it was like eighth and ninth grade. You know, discovering the classics into the new death metal stuff, but kind of tearing through all the thrash metal classics, backtracking, you know, dubbing tapes off of friends. I listened to this so much on my Walkman. I used to go to school in the boondocks for a year or two, and it was all these little country towns that were connected, and the whole school district was massive. So the trek to school on the bus would take like almost an hour and a half in the morning. It was terrible. And I had an auto reverse Walkman, and it was just Anthrax over and over again. And it's such ear candy. It's such a well written thrash record. I've listened to it too much. Almost feel the same way about Persistence of Time, but that's a darker, kind of more engaging kind of record. So for whatever reason, I don't know why there's albums that I get sick of and just have permanently imprinted in my brain, never really need to listen to, and, whereas other ones that I've listened to just as much from the same time period, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna throw that on. I don't know what decides that. Who knows? And then we got a metal band that deserves more recognition. Oh, there's many. You know, there's so many goddamn metal bands. One that's been popping up lately a lot that I just thought of when I was doing the polls for this is Ripping Corpse. This is a boot of all their demos. New Jersey, thrashy death metal stuff. You know, super technical, way ahead of their time. I mean, obviously, Eric Rutan is a man that needs no introduction, that is massively influential as a producer, as a guitarist, Hate Eternal, Morbid Angel, now just joined Cannibal Corpse. Super great guitarist, but I don't feel like, for as important as he is, people don't talk about his old band as much as they should. What's important to me about Ripping Corpse isn't so much their music in and of itself, which is really great. I mean, these early demos, some of the earlier demos are definitely more straight up thrash, but still like technically dizzying. That Dreaming with the Dead, their one full length, is an incredible like tech thrash death record. And then they have an unreleased album that's also really impressive. That you can, if you have access to Soulseek, I think you can track it down. What's interesting to me is just the influence they had on a certain sound that kind of mutated throughout the 90s and into the 2000s that particularly bands from the tri-state area, they had a big influence on Human Remains, who in turn had a big influence on a lot of stuff that went on to become metalcore. Namely, you can hear a strong Human Remains influence on early Dillinger Escape Plan, Dead Guy. You can hear Ripping Corpse too. Rorschach, and then it just went from there to, you know, spun off into like Burnt by the Sun, who had the drummer from Human Remains, Dave Whitty, of course, into Norma Jean and all those terrible metalcore bands that from that era of metalcore that I fucking hated, that I just talked about. So I think their influence is, I mean, something really needs to be said about, especially locally. I mean, I'm not from New Jersey, so I only know from interviews and stuff, but it seems like they had such a massive influence and had such a cool fan base, like in the 80s and 90s, and played with everybody. There was an interview I listened to with the singer from Floor Punch, Porter, who's, I always knew that band as like a late 90s youth crew revival, quote unquote, kind of band that were like strict fundamentalists about like what New York hardcore and straight edge hardcore should sound like. And they were good at the time. Like, I was never super into that stuff when it was going on. Going back and listening to it now, it's pretty fun. But anyway, I mean, that kind of guy from that sort of band was like, yeah, fucking Ripping Corpse was amazing live. I used to go to every show they played, and like they had the best mosh parts and blah 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 blah. So you got to think like Ripping Corpse influenced a lot outside of metal, and it's a cool capsule of like what a small scene had at the time and what really talented bunch of people can do in terms of influencing lots and lots of stuff for years to come. So this is the glorious ass ripping demos from them. It's on Reek of Death Records. It's on a color, I think. Yeah, green. So there you go. There's my video. We'll be back soon. Currently uploading is the Zoom call, the teleconference with me and Eric and Mike Woodford talking about Japanese hardcore. So after you watch that, maybe watch this. Talk to you later. Over and out.